Floyd! Floyd! I'll knock you out! He's sick, look at him.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Now it's time for another installment of what is fast becoming the most popular segment here on the channel, RINGIQ Hate Mail. Guy who goes by the name Antonio Mosley, who didn't like that I pointed out the boxing voice's aversion to foreign fighters and how they're always finding ways to tear them down. Whether it was Gennady Golovkin years ago, or Alexander Usyk years later, or Inoue, what seems to be the common denominator in fighters that they're always tearing down is that they're foreign. Antonio said, your assumptions are the equivalent of leftists assuming right-wingers are racists for not allowing foreigners into the country. Did the boxing voice mention nationality? Did they have to? What about his ethnicity or race? No again. Religion? Nope. Well, I didn't mention race or religion as being the premise for the criticism, simply that he's not American. So what did he say that was justified of calling him a bigot or describing the person as xenophobic? A false equivalency argument, and I already went all through that in my video. You're just playing dumb because you are dumb. You've done this before, where you play the contrarian, ignoring what is obvious the most. You know, the entire comment section of that video where he left this lengthy comment is littered with individuals that are making the exact same observation that I made, that a lot of the people in the American boxing media, the boxing voice included, are unnecessarily hard on foreigners. You just want to be a contrarian, pretending that you don't see what everybody else seems to see? You presume the boxing voice has a distaste for non-American boxers, or to be more accurate, African-American boxers, due to believing X group of fighters are overall superior to Y group of fighters. I didn't say the boxing voice has a distaste towards African-American fighters. What the fuck are you talking about? Inoue's Japanese. You failed to provide any evidence for this and simply accused the person of doing the behavior to discredit his argument of Inoue being praised for fighting a prospect while Tank was criticized for doing the same thing, which is hypocrisy. Oh, I see. So you actually agree with Nestor. Not surprising. I could make some assumptions about you and what you are, where you're from, what you look like, what's your pigment. Would I be right? I could make some assumptions about what really motivates your partiality, because you're the partial one, not me. I'm not Japanese. I've got no predisposition towards liking Japanese fighters or even liking foreign fighters. I'm American. So in being American, I know how your minds work, and I can make these assumptions, as I have the unique insights to do so. I know who you're partial to, and I don't even know what you look like, but I can just tell based on your comments. I can make observations about you, the same way I made observations about Nestor, both of which would be accurate. I can make the observation that if you're actually qualifying Nestor's false equivalency argument, it's because you have the same biases that he does. People didn't all of a sudden start praising Inoue for fighting David Allen Picasso. They've been praising him because he's a 4-weight, 2-time lineal, 2-time Ring Magazine, 2-time undisputed champion. If he's ranked on the pound for pound and people are always singing his praises, that's why they praise him, not because he fought David Allen Picasso. So suggesting that it's hypocritical to praise Inoue for beating Picasso, who was shouting it from the rooftops that he beat Picasso, while criticizing Gervonta for Frank Martin. Gervonta gets criticized not for fighting Frank Martin, but for who he didn't fight, that he didn't unify with anybody at 130 or 135, that there were better people around to fight than Frank Martin, whereas you can't say that about Inoue because he cleared out his weight class. He fought all the champions that were there. Did Gervonta? Fought the champions, fought his mandatories. That's what makes it a false equivalency argument, but you already knew that. It's your own personal biases that compel you to pretend that that was an adequate parallel when it wasn't. Picasso is not a parallel for Frank Martin because Picasso is a bigger, younger fighter who Inoue is fighting at his 4th weight. Has Gervonta even campaigned at 4 weights? Wasn't campaigning at his 4th weight when he fought Frank Martin. So let's just cut through the bullshit, because you've done this before. Do you think you sound smart when you write this bullshit? You are the one with the bias towards fighters like Gervonta. That's why you're defending him like Nestor was defending him. Let me take a guess that you're American. Would I be right? Think this guy's honest enough to answer the question? And can I also take a guess that you're the same race as Gervonta? Think this guy's honest enough to answer the question? No, but he knows that I'm right. And when he doesn't answer the question, that'll prove it, because he's the one with the bias. Not me. I don't have a bias towards Japanese fighters because, well, I'm not Japanese. I've seen the boxing voice do to foreign fighters what they did to Inoue this past weekend for many years now. Many years ago, they were critical of Golovkin, then Usyk, then the British fighters, now the Asian fighters. They don't like foreigners. It's very obvious. It's why the entire comment section is littered with people that are making the same observation that I made. Because it's obvious. Just like it's obvious what you are and what your biases are, and why you're qualifying Nestor's false equivalency argument. Because you have the same bias that he does. So easy to read. Think you're slick, think you're smart, you make the same cockamamie arguments every single time, trying to be a contrarian when it's very obvious what motivates you. You just don't say it outright because you don't want people like me, to be right about. People like you. But I don't need to hear it from you. I don't need you to qualify it. It's very obvious. Anybody can see. Picasso's supposed to be a parallel for Frank Martin. Inoue only has time for the Alan Picassos of the world because he already took out all the champions. He already unified his weight class. He's already undisputed, having defended that crown, 4 times? Is that what Gervonta was doing when he fought Frank Martin? Did he beat all the champions at the weight? Is he a bona fide 3-weight world champion, 4-weight world champion? You already know the answer. You just pretend you don't because of your biases, and you can have them, but keep them to yourself because the rest of us don't care. You want a seat at our table to be able to talk to us. I don't want to talk to you.
I want to hear what you've got to say.
I'm only pointing it out because the rest of the audience is going to think it's funny when I so easily poke holes in your flimsy argument. You're the comic relief, Antonio.
Your argument is a joke.
Like every other argument you make here on this channel, you are here for our entertainment. Don't flatter yourself that you were the next guy that ended up in a segment of the RINGIQ hate mail. You've got to be pretty fucking stupid to end up there in the first place. Now, just in keeping with the theme of all things Inoue, and his performance against David Allen Picasso this past weekend, 2-weight world champion Farrell Frampton said, "I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We can't deny Inoue's greatness, but if he jumps up to feather, Nick Ball beats him."
What the fuck?
It's not as hot a take as it appears on the surface. I understand where Farrell is coming from. You go up there and you fight Nick Ball, you're not in for a boxing match, because Nick Ball is not a boxer's boxer. He's a brawler. He's a pressure guy. He is a physical fighter who, to a smaller fighter debuting at a new weight, might prove to be too physical, too rough and tumble. You see Nick Ball go out there with guys that are bigger than he is and hip toss them.
That's the rationale.
That Nick Ball is not a boxer's boxer. He's a dirty boxer who uses a lot of dirty, roughhouse tactics. So if you're Inoue at what is your 5th weight, this guy might beat you. That's what Carl is thinking. Seeing what Junto Nakatani experienced at a new weight opposite the ring, a pressure guy in Sebastian Hernandez, Carl thinks the same thing could happen to Inoue at feather, because Nick is a pressure guy. Nick is a pressure guy, like Sebastian is a pressure guy.
That's his rationale. But is he right? Do you agree with him?
What if Inoue's power doesn't carry up to featherweight? Can he fall back on his boxing, and is his boxing well enough that he can outbox Nick Ball if he can't knock him out?
Well, he did outbox David Allen Picasso without knocking him out, and he did outbox MJ Akhmadaliev without knocking him out. He was good enough a boxer that he didn't have to stop those guys to beat them decisively. Could he do that to Nick at a higher weight?
Sam Goodman almost did.
That's the part that I think Carl Frampton isn't factoring into his equation. Maybe he forgot that for long spells in the Sam Goodman fight, Sam Goodman was outboxing Nick Ball, and Sam moved up from 122 up to 126, but Sam Goodman is no Naoya Inoue. So if you have to labor, and if you have to languish with the likes of a Sam Goodman, it might be even worse with a Naoya Inoue.
Tucked away in his native Liverpool for the last 2 or 3 fights, Nick Ball has been able to get away with a lot of fouling, a lot of roughhouse tactics, a lot of things that might get a point deducted in an Inoue fight, since that would be a high-profile fight and Inoue would be the A-side. The last 3 guys Nick Ball fought were all guys who moved up from 122. Coincidentally, Nick Ball hasn't looked too hot in his last 3 fights, especially the last one with Sam Goodman that didn't end in a knockout. He didn't stop Sam Goodman. So if you can't stop Sam, I find it hard to believe you're going to stop Inoue.
Sam was never known as a puncher at 122. He's not known as a puncher now at 126, but he packed enough punch that he got Nick's respect early on.
If Sam can do that, what can Inoue do, who's a noticeably bigger puncher, noticeably faster too, a noticeably better boxer?
If Sam can make you look like that for a few rounds, how can Inoue make you look for a few rounds?
I'm not that boxing fan who's overprotective of a boxer. I acknowledge that brave fighters like Inoue tend to crash and burn, that at some point he may lose, and when he does, it's gonna be bad. But I'm not sure that Nick is the guy to get him. By the time that Inoue moves up to the featherweight division in this hypothetical scenario, how much time would have passed, and how well would Nick Ball be making the featherweight limit? Of course, a big Inoue fight would be enough to keep him there.
It's a bigger fight than any fight at 126 or 130, so Nick would be receptive to the fight, and that would be enough to keep him there. But how well will he be making the weight while he waits for Inoue to move up? He doesn't seem on the eve of moving up, on the verge of it, as Nick Ball has been waiting a long time for him to do that.
Him and every other guy with a belt at 126. That's why they're not unifying with each other. They're waiting for Inoue. Of all the champions that are up there, I would identify Rafael Espinoza as the biggest threat to Inoue.
Not Nick Ball.
Because Rafael Espinoza is massive for featherweight. The guy stands in at about 6'2". If there's a champion up there that Inoue might have to steer clear of, it would be Rafa more than Nick Ball. Rafa more than Angelo Leo.
It's too soon to tell, and that's how I see it. I understand where Carl Frampton is coming from, that Nick Ball is not a boxer's boxer, and when the opening bell sounds, you're not in for a boxing match.
I get it. But for long spells in the opening stanza of the Sam Goodman fight, he was getting outboxed by a guy who's not a big puncher, who moved up in weight. If he can do that, Inoue might do better. It's not a foregone conclusion that Nick wins.
So I get what Carl is saying, though I don't necessarily agree.
Don't forget Nick's got a fight with Brandon Figueroa, yet another guy who moved up from Super Bantam up to Feather, and we'll see how he makes out with him. If you can't steamroll these lesser fighters that are moving up from Super Bantam, that doesn't bode well for your chances against the monster. And now as it pertains to that upcoming Nick Ball versus Brandon Figueroa fight, Brandon says, fighting Nick in his territory makes for a special night. Liverpool, England. Brandon Figueroa barely had time to catch his breath during a whistle-stop tour of Liverpool, promoting his upcoming fight with WBA featherweight champion Nick Ball. Within 3 hours of his plane landing in the UK, the 28-year-old had cleared immigration and completed a press conference. The Texan has ventured across the southern border and into Mexico before, but had never been to Europe, and a couple of things immediately grabbed his attention. Drivers sit on the right side, and they drive on the left. That's the first thing I noticed. The two-weight world champion told the ring as he took a few minutes before completing his media obligations. Oh, and the plugs are different as well. Traveling without a large entourage, Figueroa arrived quietly and took his place at the press conference. He and Ball engaged in a long face-off but spoke respectfully before heading their separate ways. That relaxed attitude will be extremely useful on February 7th. The ring's number 7 ranked featherweight will be back in Liverpool to fight, and the welcome will be much less warm. Figueroa is a 10-year veteran of the sport and a vastly experienced professional, but has never before boxed a rival in their own backyard. Yes, this is actually his territory, literally. So yeah, it's the first time, he said. When I fought Luis Neri, it was at Carson, California, so it wasn't necessarily his territory, but here, it's Nick Ball's city.
Further indication that things are definitely changing in boxing, because American fighters don't usually have to travel. Usually, it's guys that have to come to them, where Brandon is going to Nick. Comparatively, Nick is a bigger draw in his city of Liverpool than Brandon is anywhere in America. And it also helps that, well, Nick is the champion. He's the one with the belt. You're the one that wants it.
It's a special, special night. In February, Figueroa struggled to pin down the slick, talented Stephen Fulton and lost his WBC title in their highly anticipated rematch. Despite the loss, a number of avenues remained open to him. He is highly ranked by the WBO and the IBF, and only recently exited the WBC standings, but in July, he outpointed Joet Gonzalez, quite controversially, in a WBA eliminator, and he was subsequently named as Ball's mandatory challenger.
More dubious business practices from the WBA, because not only did Brandon get a decision that he didn't deserve, but he was made the mandatory for Nick ahead of interim champion Mirko Coelho, unbeaten of Argentina. Before Brandon even wins this fight, Mirko was in position. He should be the one fighting Nick.
Nick is much more clever and cute than many give him credit for, but the 28-year-old champion isn't going to box and move like Stephen Fulton did. The ring's number 3 ranked featherweight is a naturally aggressive bundle of energy who has imposed himself on every one of his opponents so far. The all-action Figueroa appreciates Ball's style and attitude, but believes he will get a shock when the pair inevitably meet center ring. I think my style of fighting is just very aggressive, very come forward. I hardly go back, he said. I'm always pressuring, pushing the fight, and styles make fights. So we just have to see until how it plays out. I can't really say anything right now, but I know that my style of fighting is just very awkward, very unique. I would say that Brandon is a pressure guy, and so is Nick. The question is, who's better at it?
There is a noticeable discrepancy in height between the fighters, that Nick is an exceptionally small featherweight where Brandon is on the bigger end, making this a David and Goliath kind of deal, a big train, little train situation. It will be Nick that has home field advantage, so that helps. I don't expect the referee officiating the fight to ride Nick Ball's ass or be on his case over his dirty boxing.
Though at the same time, we have seen Brandon Figueroa in this kind of stylistic matchup before, when he fought Luis Nery. Luis Nery's a pressure guy, like Brandon is a pressure guy, and Brandon stopped him with a well-placed body shot. Could he stop Nick?
I don't know, Nick's a bigger guy than Luis Nery.
Another observation. This fight is a byproduct of the PBC being in a weakened state, because not that long ago, the idea that one of their boys would be flying out to the United Kingdom, even for a title fight, would have been a non-starter, where these days, the PBC don't have that many fight dates for guys like Brandon.
Or belts to fight for, or bodies.
I believe that Brandon even getting this opportunity is a byproduct of the WBA's ongoing relationship with the PBC that's often been described as being unethical, because outwardly, it seems like the WBA is always doing their fighters favors, and they did Brandon one, allowing him to skip past Mirko Coelho to get a title shot that should have went to Mirko.
Now, you could argue that Brandon is a more well-known fighter than Mirko Coelho, but is that how you assign title opportunities? By who's more well-known? What's the point in fighting in the eliminators and subsequently fighting for an interim title if it doesn't get you a title shot, if it goes to a guy that's ranked behind you?
Whoever wins the Nick Ball versus Brandon Figueroa fight may at some point have to answer to Mirko, who's still waiting in the wings. And we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches.